Hey everyone, and welcome to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Firefly, episode 14, the final episode of the show that is called Objects in Space. So, full spoilers for the episode as always. And thank you to Keith Beard, who is the sponsor on these Firefly reviews. So, thank you to him. Final episode.
We're done now, right?
Bittersweet. Well, hold on a second. There's a movie, which will wrap things up. But this is the final episode of the show itself. And what's interesting, there's so many nerdy things that I'm like a part of or fan of or whatever, right? But so much of it comes from before I was born or when I was young, and so young that I wasn't really into it until later in my life. This is probably the earliest thing where the pain of the cancellation and the agonizing wait for that 3 years, and then the celebration of the movie was something I experienced in real time, live as it was happening. So there's a kind of a special place in my heart for the saga of Firefly and Serenity. So, a little bit bittersweet seeing this episode again, because it's a very good episode. And
it is, yeah.
Interesting what to go on. It's interesting that it just kind of almost by accident kind of had a little bit of finality to it, and it's not. I mean, it's not a season final level of finality, but there's a little bit there.
Do you know what? I think this is quite intentional, and I've seen this in other shows as well, where they don't know if they're going to get the back 9 or not, so they write the last episode of the the first 13, just in case. If that's it, it kind of works enough. I feel there's I've seen a good handful of shows do that.
Yeah. It's got a little bit there. So we'll dive into it. I got my notes, and I will say, unsurprisingly, this episode has the most notes of any episode.
Of course, it bloody does.
I had half an A4 page before the title music.
What? I'm not gonna lie. There was part of me then that was like, should I do a spit take? And then I thought, no, I'm not doing it.
Maybe if you're drinking water, because you wouldn't necessarily mind stuff getting a little bit of water on it, but sticky,
yeah, exactly.
Sticky, whatever you're drinking.
It's Coke, yeah.
And I almost, annoyingly, I had to just do a little bit of a fourth page, so I've wasted a whole page with just a little bit, which is annoying.
Just right then, start like your next Mr. Robot notes, just a couple of lines down.
Oh, that's so unneat. 3 full pages of notes, and then a little bit at the end.
Just start your next page of notes there, and then once we've recorded that Mr. Robot, just rip the pages out, and you'll never have to think about it again.
No. I mean, besides, just in case I end up in a bit of a pickle where I run out of pages, and I'm forced to use the back of the pages, which I hate doing.
You don't even use the back. You are killing trees.
I don't like using the back. It doesn't feel as good because there's already like the right indent and the writing from the other side's already there.
I hope you're aware of how many trees you're killing.
Oh yeah, because paper's the reason the Amazon rainforest is in trouble. Not
I'm just
everything
saying,
else wood's used for.
I'm just saying you could do your bit.
Let's begin the episode with.
Yeah, I suppose we probably should.
With a very dramatically scored visual effects shot of the camera going through the ship, going through the layers of the exterior, the hull of all where the cables are and everything, and eventually landing on river where the music just stops dead. It's very emotional sounding, very beautiful sounding almost, and it just stops dead on river. But if nothing else, it clearly tells us this episode's about river. It makes it very clear right away. And to an extent, the ship. It immediately sort of also says that the ship's kind of a primary player. In a way, it is. Not in the same way it wasn't out of gas, but the way it's used in this episode specifically.
Yeah.
So that's cool. We hear kind of whispers and voices, as if that's what River's hearing. This is maybe the closest we've gotten in the show to actually kind of trying to show us what she actually experiences in her mind.
Yeah, we get a lot more of that just later in this scene.
Yeah, so because basically the opening of the episode is actually following River around as she kind of like goes around the ship and interacts with various characters on the ship. And she gets up and she comes out, and it's just next to the medical bay, and there's that little couch there that we've seen a bunch of times, and Simon and Kaylee are kind of bonding, but they're kind of in a better place after they've had a couple of rough episodes.
They're hitting it off.
Yeah, and he's telling these stories about when he first graduated med school, and how he got drunk and he was naked and all the rest of it, and she's kind of joking about imagining him naked, and they're flirting, and it's all very pleasant and nice. And then we have this sort of surreal moment where he turns to River and says, "I could be there right now," and it's very deadpan.
And the entire sound changes.
Yeah,
like the way it's presented. I think it's the reverb all cuts out entirely, so it feels dead in terms of the way it's the way it actually sounds.
Yeah, it feels eerie. Like it goes to an eerie sort of place. So that's really cool. And obviously, it immediately goes back to laughing with Kaylee. So it's just very clear that it's just in her head. Like this is not something. And you could argue that is that what he's thinking? Is he like regretting that he's out here, protecting his sister? Is that what she's thinking at the very least? Then she discovers Book and Jane, who are in the kitchen. And actually, there's a little sort of almost side plot in this episode. I say side plot, it's like two scenes, but of Book and Jane kind of like becoming friends. So it was like I mean, we've kind of had this a little bit before as well, I suppose, but just seeing their friendship.
Yeah, we've seen it a few times, as recently as a couple episodes ago after the funeral, or before the funeral, after the dead body shows up, and Jane's there, going working out and offering to to get their Book involved, and they kind of have a bit of a chat.
Yeah. So she stumbles in here and they're just having a conversation, and clearly Book is describing abstinence to him, and Jane's like, "What? Not never?" And he's like, "No, I mean, I focus my efforts in other places." And Jane just goes, "Like masturbating?" And then there's a bit of a joke though where Book says, "Oh, you know what, Book, tell me you're not thinking of of taking the vow." He's like, "Hey, it's got a ring to it. I mean, I could be, for example, and Book's like, "Oh well, how many miracles do you perform?" And he's chopping vegetables. They're both like prepping dinner as they're doing this, and he's like, "Well, I once shot a man in the neck from 500 yards with a super scope, and that's got to count for something upstairs, right?" And he's like, "It'll be taken into account, yes." And there's a moment here as well with obviously River where she hears them talk about something else, like I know a little sign of maybe was in their head, or
Jane saying, he wanted the money, or he would have turned her in, something along those.
There's that, and then Book says something as well. But when it comes back to them, they're both laughing. They're clearly actually oddly good friends.
Yeah, they're getting along.
Yeah, so it's nice. And then she keeps going, and she ends up on the bridge. And she hears, I actually wrote down the wrong name here. I wrote Wash and Anara. But she has like she sees like almost memories of Wash and Zoe having sex or making out or whatever, and it's kind of like this is the aura of the bridge to her. This is what she's kind of experiencing here, because this is Wash's place, I guess.
Yeah.
So she's going through and she's experiencing all these things, and I think what's interesting, given the context of the whole episode here with this one, is that there's no one here. It's an empty room, which is actually a thing that comes up later, is the idea of an empty room and what is its purpose. Is it still what it is because it's empty?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what it is, it's a room. But we'll get to the existential parts of the episode.
Yeah. We'll call someone out on the shit, I think.
Who's shit?
We'll get there.
Okay, I don't know how I feel about what you just implied, but so and then we get to Mal and Nara again. River sort of eavesdropping a little bit, and it's her talking about leaving and wanting to go, and they're going to drop her off on whatever planet, and she again. River has the moment where she sort of hears something different, and Anara says, "I'm a big girl, just tell me." And then Mal, again, this is River's weird sort of perception, not if it means a damn thing. And they're not looking at her when they say this. They're not even looking at each other.
Yeah, it's just you don't even know who they're talking to. It feels like it's from a different conversation entirely.
Yeah. So River goes downstairs to the main part of the deck, and she picks up a branch, and it's really odd because it's like, why is there a branch here? They're in space. This is kind of odd, and the background changes. She's in a field. It's a bright day, and she's talking about how it's just a branch. It's a beautiful thing. It's a an object that is harmless. And then we come back to reality and we see everyone on the ship approaching her slowly because she's holding a gun.
Yeah.
There was a gun lying out there on the floor. And we never actually
Probably
quite...
Jane's fault.
Jane denies it adamantly in the next scene, but we never actually get an actual answer to why there was a gun lying out on the floor. Unless I missed something.
Jane anyway. No, I don't think you did.
Unless I missed something. People in the comments might tell me, but so obviously there's a nice little tense moment here. Mal gets the gun off of her, and they're all kind of freaked out a little bit. And Joe, sometimes like Firefly will obviously have these laugh out loud jokes, but sometimes they'll have just a little one which it doesn't necessarily shift the comedy. It still keeps the dramatic tension of the conversation, but it'll still kind of be like a funny little jab in there. Like here when Simon, because Mal says, "Hey, like I thought you said she was getting better," and then Simon starts to explain the medication and how each one eventually stops being effective because our body just sort of gets used to it and breaks it down. And he goes, "Hey, if I wanted all the medical mumbo jumbo, I'd be talking to a doctor." And Simon just turns and goes, "You are talking to a doctor."
He just goes, "I am a doctor." And I was like, "Yeah, and you best remember that."
He's like, "Yeah, but the point is though, just kind of change the subject."
Yeah.
So, yeah. And there's even a line here at the end where Mal says, "We're very much alone out here in the ship," because he's basically saying to him that, "Hey, you're the doctor. What if you get shot? There'll be no one to patch you up." Foreshadowing, of course. And then even the line here, "There's no one out here because we're in space." Then we cut to outside, there's another ship.
Because of course.
Because the ironic cut. And that is when we go to the opening title sequence. And yes, that represents half a page of notes already.
Maybe we'll get through this a little bit quicker than expected.
Maybe, but I guess there was so many little moments. All these little conversational moments in this opening of the episode.
Yeah.
So, comes back after the credits, and Wash and Zoe are discussing on the bridge about River. And it's kind of like, oh, it's a shame. She's kind of out of it. Like, is she safe? Is she dangerous? Wash does note there's an anomaly in the readings in the computer. Clearly, early the bounty hunter that we're about to meet is doing something to mess with the scan so that they can't detect him. And Jane and Mal are arguing. Jane's like, "Hey, it's not my fault." And at one point, he even says, "Hey, I don't even want them on the ship." And Mal sort of leans in and goes, "Are you really sure you want to take the conversation there?" And what's interesting is we know that Simon knows what Jane did in the aerial.
But Mal doesn't know that Simon knows, presumably.
And the rest of the crew don't know.
No, not at all.
So, there is a sort of threat there. And he's like, "No, I just don't want anyone to know. I just don't want anyone to be blaming me for something I didn't do," is his sentiment. For a little bit here, where Wash says something sarcastic, and Jane says, "You want to go, little man?" And Wash says, "Only if it's a place with candlelight."
Yeah. Wash has had a diffuser situation.
But they're basically saying that she's never actually handled a gun before. This is kind of weird. And Kaylee comes in and says that ain't exactly true. And she's clearly going to tell him the story of what happened in War Stories, which we do get to. Although, before we actually quite go to that, there's also shots of Early outside, kind of like, coming over in a spacesuit and sort of...
Just making his way over.
Making his way over, yeah. A bit of tinkering here or there. So we go to the kitchen. Kaylee's telling the story from War Stories about River with a gun. And again, this is a very serious conversation about a very ongoing story about River and, like, what actually is she? What can she do? And yet there's also all these little, flitterings of jokes that are kind of littered throughout. Some of which, even though they don't necessarily get laugh out loud funny, really give me a good chuckle. One of the first ones is where, Kaylee tells a story and someone says, "Oh, that's not possible." And Kaylee's like, "Yeah, it wasn't like it was magic or whatever. It was this. She just did the math and did it." And Jane just goes, "She killed him with mathematics."
Yeah, and that comes up a couple of times over the course of the scene as well. So it kind of gets funnier every time.
Yeah, and then someone says no person can do that, and Simon takes that a bit of an offense to that and says, "What, you're saying she's not a person now?" And then Jane says, like, "Is she a witch?" And and then Wash again. There's like a running thing in this episode with Wash and Jane, like Wash being sarcastic and making fun of Jane, but Wash is like,
sick of Jane shit.
He's like, "Oh, she's in Congress with the Beast," and Jane goes, "She's in Congress." And what I love about this one is that often in this show, when Jane says something really stupid, no one really acknowledges that he said it. But in this time, Wash actually goes, "How did you learn English? Like what?"
It was. How does your brain even have the capacity to learn the English language?
I know.
It cracked me up.
So good, so good.
Yeah.
Well, then we have another little dig here, from Wash. Well, not from Wash. It's actually more from Zoe. But they're talking about this. Mal actually brings up that she knows things. That she seems to know things that she shouldn't. And Simon tries. Well, she's very intuitive, and they were messing with her brain. And Mal says, "I don't think it's just that. I think she's a reader." And they start talking about mind reading, right? They're openly talking about this. This is something we've kind of, poked at and speculated at and whatever throughout the show, but this is the first time they're openly having a conversation. And Wash says, "That sounds like science fiction." And then Zoe says, "We live in a spaceship, dear."
And he just goes, "So?"
Oh dear. Well, the funny thing about it, I think to us it doesn't really sound like science fiction. It's more supernatural than science fiction. To us, there's a difference, but I get it. It's fine. It works for the joke.
It does, and the whole thing of Zoe's like, yeah, I mean, not so long ago, living in a spaceship was science fiction.
Yeah, obviously.
So, so her point. So why not this, right?
Yeah. Which tells me that Zoe's well read and knows about history. That she's aware that what the perception of space travel used to be. She's maybe even heard of Star Trek, for example. She's watched some Star Trek and oh, this is what they used to think space travel would be like.
Obviously, given the state of everything, ships aren't particularly recent. This is a long established method of transportation and travel.
That was the end of your sentence.
Yeah, no, that made perfect sense.
I know, but I just felt like you were gearing up for more. I thought you were going to make more of a grand point.
No, I was just backing up.
Okay.
About that she's well read.
Okay. And again, we have some more jokes here. Jane saying, "I don't like the idea of someone reading what I'm thinking," and Nara says, "No one likes the idea of knowing what you're thinking,
hearing what you're thinking,
of hearing what you're thinking." Yeah. Such good digs, and there were so many good little lines in these big conversations. I think that's why I have more notes. Is I just had to note down more of them than I usually do.
That's true, because I don't feel like there's much. I mean, don't worry, it's a bigger episode than the last handful, but I don't think there's more necessarily going on plot-wise, beat for beat, than a lot of the others. But it is just a lot of smaller moments that are sprinkled in.
Yep. So Simon and Kaylee, after he kind of runs out, he's a bit of he feels like everyone's kind of victimizing or targeting River a little bit, and he says she loves this ship. This is kind of the first time he's kind of openly talked about how River feels about this place. We always hear about him feeling out of place and feeling like he doesn't belong or whatever, but. And he says the line, he starts talking about what it was like as a doctor, living at a big fancy or living near a big fancy hospital and getting well paid. And he's like, "I'd be there right now." He actually says the line that River imagined him saying earlier or predicted that he was going to say earlier. Although the tone of it's very different. It's not like he's angry that he's saying this. He's more just,
But I thought it was interesting how, because especially that one didn't necessarily feel like a prediction in that moment because. Yeah. That one felt like, because he was talking about how where he used to be and where he could have been now, so it felt like that was a thought he was having in that moment, as opposed to say Mal's one, which felt like something yet to come. So it kind of when you get to this, you kind of go, "Oh, I wonder if there were any others that were kind of yet to happen."
And I wonder if they were from future episodes. I wonder if these were all actually seeds for later,
it feels like they might have been.
Yeah, I can see that. So, Kaylee insists, is there anything that you do like here? Is it so bad here? And, they're about to kiss. Book kind of interrupts them accidentally and breaks the moment. Mal, do you know what's funny? Because Mal ends the conversation from before saying, "Okay, it's late, we should all go to bed, think this over, yada, yada, yada." And I feel like there's a nice thing, there's a nice element to seeing what it's like in the ship, at night when they all decide to turn in, because we've never really seen that before. So we get to see them all kind of getting ready for bed and stuff like that. Mal's kind of like finishing up whatever he's eating, and we get like a shot of him going back to his bunk. And notably, there's a single shot that goes from his entrance to his bunk to over to where the exterior door is, where Early drops in. It's not. I mean, once he drops in, it cuts a different shot, but the actual turn over to that area is one shot to kind of just establish that, hey, he actually just went to bed. Now this exterior person, this presence is on the ship.
Yeah, and another big thing that we get during this segment is seeing Kaylee go to the engine room.
Yes, yes, and Mal actually, there's a really funny moment here where Mal, we get like a fade to black ad break, come back, Early's kind of poking around, and Mal just kind of like stumbles into him. He clearly get back up to go and get a snack or something like that.
And the two of them just stop and stare at each other for like 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah, there's just a moment of them going like, "What the hell? You're not on my crew."
Yeah.
How did this happen? Mal gets his ass kicked though, gets knocked out, and he gets locked in his bunk. All of the bunks get locked. Early, does a bit of doohicking with the comms or the security system.
Yeah.
And he goes to the engine room where Kaylee is, and this is where the episode takes a bit of a dark turn in terms of tone. Because obviously they kind of treat him like he's this mysterious figure, and the music's kind of suggesting darkness, but kind of in a pulpy way. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's going to be super dark. And notably, Kaylee actually, when she hears a noise at first, thinks it's River. She's like, River, is that you? Like everyone's kind of creeped out by River at this point.
Because that's a whole point as well. Like we know River was listening to their conversation earlier.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
because it does that thing where she's kind of under the floor. Well, she's the next floor down, but she can hear it. But after that, we never actually see where she goes. Everyone else heads off to bed. They get sent away by Mal, but we never actually cut back to River during this, so we have no idea what she's done.
Yep. So we don't know where. Yeah, it's a complete mystery to us what River's up to at this point, which is kind of an important part of the whole story, because ultimately we're going to realize that she's kind of missing, and we're going to go looking for her.
It's why it's so plausible that Kaylee thinks this is River, because it's like, well, yeah, it could be. Why wouldn't it be?
So, and he starts talking about how he loves this ship, and he starts talking about the design of it and whatnot, and then he has this really interesting way of speaking. I think the performance from this guy that plays Early is really interesting. Yeah. Very well directed. He has this way of speaking where he'll just say something really dark in the middle of a sentence, almost just really casual, really
nonchalant. It just kind of comes out with something that's really quite severe.
Yeah, because he says, "Have you ever been raped?" He just drops that sentence in, and Kaylee looks absolutely terrified. And this is a moment where you stop kind of treating it as a silly TV. I mean, not that I think people think this is a silly TV show, but it's the moment where okay, this is getting kind of serious. I have to be on the edge of my seat now.
I know what you mean, in the sense that Firefly, while it has had moments where this is serious, so you pay attention, a lot of it is kind of jokey fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even when it's doing it's serious stuff, there's so much comedy throughout all of even those beats that it feels lighthearted. So when this hits, it's so tone deaf to everything else that it sticks out.
Yeah. So he threatens her some more. Says, tell me where the river is. I'm going to tie you up now. And he even keeps the because he says, I'm going to tie you up and I'm going to give you a present. Even up until this point, it still sounds like he's talking, an innuendo. Yeah. And he says, look, you tell me where she is, you don't make a fuss, nothing bad's going to happen to you, I won't hurt you, I won't do anything. But if you do make a fuss, your body's just a body, and I'll think of a use for it. He gets very threatening in a very kind of cold, sociopathic way.
Yeah, it's very clinical, because he acts and pretends like he's not even going to get pleasure. He's not even doing it because he wants to rape her, just because that's the threat that'll work.
Yeah. And I think it sets him up as an intro, because obviously up to this point he's been kind of mysterious. We've not heard him speak. Because literally the first thing we hear him say in the entire episode is, "I love this ship." That is his first line in the episode.
Yeah.
And it kind of ties into what the title of the episode is, and kind of how it relates to River. Because I think the whole point of this episode is to kind of basically establish that River is different. She is weird, and she is all these things, but that doesn't make her bad. Like, her seeing the world differently doesn't make her good or bad necessarily. That is not the gauge. And Early's this character who also sees things differently, but is clearly on the other side of the spectrum. He is clearly the dangerous end of the spectrum.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
It makes that very clear. So we have him threatening her, ties her up. Quick scene with Book. He knocks out Book.
Very quickly. It's just like one flying kick.
Yeah. He's kind of like dangling up into ladders above him, and then he gets to Simon. And Simon, so this is an interesting thing. He says, "Are you Alliance?" And Early goes, "Am I a lion? I never really thought of myself as a lion, but I am quite ferocious." And then eventually Simon jumps in. No. Are you Alliance? Oh, Alliance. I thought you said oh, no matter. And he just gets like, he's got such a way to him. I really like the performance, and this is where he gets, is a room just a room, because it's empty. If it doesn't have its purpose, then what is it? And this kind of goes back to River with the gun. It goes back to River not seeing things the way they are. She's able to disconnect them from what their purpose actually is. And Early kind of does the same thing. In fact, it's either this scene or the scene after where he starts talking about his own gun and he describes it as beautiful. And it is very noticeably very similar to the description that River gives the branch before we find out it's a gun. It's a very similar parallel in both scenes. Very intentional. And of course, where she turns it into something harmless and beautiful, and like she's imagining she's in this pretty day and it's this open air and it's all this, he's kind of saying, well, it's beautiful. That's not really the point of it, but I'll still use it.
Why not both? Right?
Yeah, I'll still use it to kill you. And he asked, Simon asked, are you a bounty hunter? And he's like, that's not it at all. I'm a bounty hunter.
That really made me laugh. I don't know why, even though I know that line's coming and I know it's stupid, and that's kind of the point of why it's funny, but it makes me laugh more than I think it should.
Yeah. Were you aware that this episode's partly inspired by Boba
Fett? No, but that makes sense.
It is.
I mean, I'll be honest. I didn't think, directly, but there are so many things in this that I would say are inspired by Star Wars. Not necessarily directly, but there are clear influences.
No, this one's specifically inspired, and there's a few other things because I read up on the commentary for this episode is really good. I've not listened to it in years, but it's a very good commentary track. But I did have a quick glance just at some stuff online about the episode, and I remember we talking about the existentialism in his commentary track and what inspired him to kind of do this kind of thing, and he talked about how he read this book and all the rest of it, and I can't go into all those details. Go and listen to the commentary track. It's worth listening to. But the whole idea with Boba Fett, it was the idea that he is, and it's kind of almost what I always complain about Boba Fett, is that he's not really a character. He's just kind of the cool badass who looks good, and that's kind of it. That's his whole thing. There's not much more. And this episode, in a lot of ways, is about just, as the episode is called, objects in space. It's just about the physical, simplicity and design of them, and what are they without the meaning behind them. Yeah,
it's one of those things where this guy, he feels really threatening, right? Because what he said to Kaylee and the way he acts, his demeanor, he's so calm and collected about all these terrible things, and he's just doing it with pretty much ease. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, there's not really much going on there, is there? It just comes down to he likes to hurting the people, and he has fun, and he gets the money for it. It's quite simple. I mean, he's quite a simple man at the end of it, despite all this philosophical bullshit that he puts on.
Yeah. He's and he's kind of, that's kind of brought up. River kind of accuses him of that later. She calls out him on, no, you just you say that hurting people is part of the job, but you took the job because you like hurting people. Yeah, really quite simple stuff. So yes, and he says, you're going to help me find your sister, and of course Simon's like, no, I'm not. He's like, you are, because every second with me is a chance to turn the tables. Maybe you'll find your moment, Doctor.
Yeah, he's like, maybe I'll slip up and you'll get away with it.
And then he also adds, I've got the engine girl tied up, and I'll go kill her. So, and again, it makes it a bit more personal. Not that his sister wasn't personal enough, but now it's, a twofer.
But the difference is he doesn't know where River is, so
yeah,
it's a less direct threat.
And as they're going past various things, they pass a knocked out book, and Simon says, you had to knock out a shepherd or whatever, and he goes, that's no shepherd.
Yeah, he knows exactly who this is, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I'll talk about that more when we do the movie, and I'll talk about the confirmation of what he actually was. But again, nice big tease of Shepard's past. By the med bay, and he starts talking about have you ever been shot? It's like they make therapists get psychoanalyzed before they can do the job, but surgeons don't get cut open. Does that seem right to you? Which becomes kind of his catchphrase. He says that a few times.
He does, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a great moment because it's when they go into the main part of the deck where he starts talking about the design of the Firefly and how the walls go out and objects in space. He says in the title of the episode, and talks about the design of things. And Simon's going to tackle him because his back's turned to him, and he just pulls up the gun, he goes right in the camera, says, "It's not your moment, Doctor. It's not your moment."
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and then they go to Anara, and he actually loses his temper at Anara for the first time. This is the first time he kind of loses his cool in the whole episode.
Yeah, and for most of the scene, again, he feels pretty collected. He's like, and he's talking to her very, logically of just, I'm going to lock you in now, but, it's fine. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah. It's not until she kind of says, "Hey, you don't have to do this," and he's like, "Don't, go to my motives," or something like that. He says, what was the exact line? If I put it down, yeah, "Don't visit my intentions." That was the line.
It's so pompous.
And then he has another one of his moments where he's like, "Men are stronger than women, but only women can bear a child." Does that seem right to you? And I'm like, "What, you want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jr.? Like that?"
Pretty much.
I'm cracking that joke. But yeah, again, I mean, and it does make you question: is this all a fad or a facade? Is this all just, wanting to give the presentation of being this cool person?
Yeah.
Dare I say? I mean, I don't know if this is. I'd go as far as this is a deconstruction of Boba Fett fandom, but there's definitely a little prod of it,
in the sense that there might be some projection going on.
Yeah.
No, I get that. But like I said, ultimately it comes down to it. And no, he's just as simple as it gets. And that's Boba Fett as well, right? He just looks cool and he's a badass, and that's it.
Yeah, but Early's a much more interesting character because he actually has a story here.
I don't know if I agree with that.
He has better presence. It's a better performance. It's a better performance. Come on now.
I mean, it's a completely different type of performance. I mean, sure.
I could have played Boba Fett. Boba Fett did not need a performance.
He needed a menacing presence. He had a menacing presence.
He just stood there. He's got a big mask on. You don't see his face or anything.
Body language. Are you really going to give me this shit after episodes and episodes of The Mandalorian with the dude being masked the entire time and telling me there's no performance?
No. He has performance because he's been doing it for 5 episodes and has tons of screen time. Boba Fett has like what, 3 scenes?
He's got performance.
He's a glorified extra. All right.
Performance.
He's an extra.
He's a badass.
The actor shouldn't have been paid that much.
Probably wasn't.
Yeah. So they get to the bridge. Zoe's waking up. Mal's waking up in their bunks because they hear noise. What's his face? Jane, not quite yet though. Jane's not woken up.
Not for a while.
And then River's voice comes in over the comms, and amongst other things, because obviously Early's saying, "Hey, where are you, girl?" Blah blah blah. She says they didn't want her, so she melted away, and ultimately says, "I am the ship. You're talking to Serenity." Now I want to talk about. I want to give you some insight into my experience watching this episode for the first time. Because the weird thing about watching this for the first time is that no one really knew when this show started like how far they were going to take this stuff, like how far they were going to take like River's powers, or like how supernatural it might get, or anything like that, right? So the first time watching this episode, I think part of everyone was kind of like, are they giving Serenity a voice? Has River become Serenity? Is this now going to be a thing? And I think part of me kind of wanted it to. Part of me wanted River to be the voice of Serenity and have this be a thing going forward.
I just want to interject. On the first time I saw this, that never once crossed my mind.
Well, yeah, but clearly, I mean, you're not in touch with your emotions, so that makes sense to me.
It just never felt like something that you were supposed to. It always felt like a metaphorical thing for me.
There was a chance. There was a chance she was going to become the ship, and she was going to, and obviously, given where our story was going to go, it was never going to happen. But there was a moment. There was a 5-minute period there where she was talking as part of the ship, and she was getting Mal in place, and she was talking to Zoe, and she even says no touching guns, which is something Mal said to her earlier. She even says that exact line. Yeah. All this stuff. It's all really good. But no, I do love all this. And it has this thing where all of a sudden everyone's hearing her thoughts and things, because despite all the talking about River this episode, none of them actually went to go and speak to her. None of them actually try and communicated with her, and I actually hear how she feels about all this all of a sudden makes them all feel a bit more human, right? It makes them all go, maybe we should have considered her feelings in this matter.
Yeah, because we have the moment, to rewind a little bit, when they find her with the gun, and Mal says, no touching guns. He's like, do you understand? I think she says, I understand, I just don't comprehend. And he's like, yeah, that's a great distinction. And they're like, right, just go away. We're going to talk. Grown-ups are talking now, essentially. And I say, she is listening to their entire conversation. And I think that is pretty notable that she does hear it all. Obviously, just it inspires this, but just in the idea of her feeling ignored, and the fact that they tried to talk to her for like half a second, and then went, all right, that'll do.
Yeah. So she even gets Kaylee to help, and Kaylee tries to apologize for telling Early where she was, and she's like, it's okay. She talks her through how to escape. There's cool tools down there, you can cut yourself free, yada yada yada. There's a great moment here where it goes back to the bridge, and River laughs when Early says something, and and Early just goes, well, that's just unsettling.
Yeah,
because she just cackles. And then she starts bringing up Early's past, his mother, and his moral code or lack thereof. And she even refers to the crew as her. She says, "You hurt my crew." And even though she's not actually Serenity, I think that's kind of notable that she would even phrase that way. Like you could argue she's just in character with her ruse, but I think it's kind of notable she says it that way. That she does see this as her crew.
For both,
yeah. There's a little jokey moment where Early pretends he's putting the gun away, and it's even like Simon, like he says to Simon, tell her I'm not a dangerous, and he's like, oh yeah, like he's fuzzy and warm, and we're becoming fast friends. Like there's a nice little beat there.
He's feeling much more comfortable now, because obviously at the start of this, Simon's at gunpoint and he feels pretty uncomfortable, but by this point where River's doing a whole shtick, he's just kind of going, oh yeah, he's fuzzy. We're becoming fast friends. He's just kind of relaxed.
But the last part of this is great because he says River, and then he sort of has a moment and goes, Serenity, and he addresses her as Serenity, and I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. And then I felt even thematically when you go back to the objects, this is object space. If you go back to Out of Gas, do you know what it is? They both start with O, and it's messing with my brain. So when you go back to Out of Gas, and that episode was about the idea that the Serenity, the ship, meant something because of the meaning we gave it, or because of the meaning Mal gave it, right?
Sure.
Because of the sentiment he gave it. And it's interesting to me that in this episode, which is about exploring the idea of people seeing things with value or no value, depending on what you attach to them, that once again, we're kind of addressing Serenity as a living character, even if it isn't real. It's a recurring theme again, so it is. Really nice. So River gets Mal prepped, tells him to go at one point. Early is talking about, the girl's the smallest cargo he's ever had, yet the most troublesome. Does that seem right to you? There's a good bit of tension here as well. Kaylee's kind of sneaking past, and she thinks that Early's going to turn around and see her, and she's kind of like, frozen for a second, but he doesn't actually turn all the way around. He's just kind of there because she's at like the bottom of the hallway that leads to the bridge. And Joe, I love that this ship's like design, it's been so well kind of explored throughout the show at this point that we do really understand the layout.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
Certainly everything on the one deck anyway. I mean, other than maybe like how exactly to get to the engine room from the upper deck, like other than that, like everything, I know how to get to the med bay from the kitchen, and then the kitchen to the bridge, and where all the the sleeping quarters are.
Yeah, it's the connecting of floors that tends to be the problem in your mind, I think.
Yeah. Interestingly, Serenity, the movie, does do a oneer that incorporates the whole thing. Now, it does cheat. There is a sneak cut when they switch floors, but it does theoretically show you where the staircase is.
It shows you the path.
Yeah. So, no touching guns to Zoe. That happens at this point as well. So then this is when River starts saying, "Oh, you like hurting people. That's why you took the job. And your mother knew, and you hurt your dog, your golden retriever. You done something to that." And she's using all this information, and that's when he actually gets the idea. Wait a minute, you're not in the ship. You're on my ship. She's just using things on his ship to like sort of tell a story about his past. Like he clearly has a photo somewhere, or he has something else, or whatever it may be. So yeah, but she says, "I'm going with you." I'm dangerous and can't be trusted. She repeats lines that others used, and it cuts around everyone hearing this. Like, everyone on the ship can hear this.
They're all feeling pretty guilty.
And Simon has his moment. He jumps in, because basically, when it sounds like River's not going to fight anymore, he's like, no, then I'm going to fight, damn it. And he jumps in, and he gets shot. And what I love about this is that he gets shot, which is ultimately early. I mean, he doesn't say it out loud again, but it's basically early saying, yeah, this wasn't your moment either. But Simon makes it his moment by jumping after him, even after he's shot. He jumps on him again.
Yeah, he does. And there was a moment before this that I really liked, similar to when Kaylee went down to the control panel.
Mm-hmm.
After River's like, all right, everyone go, because the lights went out. I think that's just before Simon does this, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
And you see Mal go down there as well. He looks up and then just backs up and gets out of sight. And you're like, that was weird. But you kind of just forget about it pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it's like great. It's when Simon tackles him the second time on the walkway. I was like, I always say there's one of my favorite moments of the show, comedy wise, but this really is. So basically, the noise wakes up Jane. He sort of, shoots his head up. He's really grumpy looking. He rips down this sheet that's covering his wall of guns. We see Vera. We see this whole arsenal of guns. And then he just rolls over and uses the blanket that was in front of them to cover himself with. I love this moment. It's
That's pretty funny.
Joke. Oh, dear. So we have that. And then Early gets outside of the ship. But the little twist here is that Mal's out there waiting for him in a spacesuit. And he launches him into space.
Pretty brutal.
Pretty brutal. He even has his head on his own ship as he's going. So no, really good. And there's a little bit of funny here where Mal's like, "Hey, you want to have a stern talking to with your brother for almost messing up your plan?" He's like, "It takes such looking after."
yeah, it's good.
Yeah, just a nice little flip. So we have surgery. Wash is mopping the brow, because Zoe's doing the surgery, and she's like, "I'm not good at this, doc," because Simon's kind of instructing her as he's like just obviously been the one operated on.
He's like, to the left. He's like, no, you're left.
I love it about the eyes. Like, you're like, I'm going to pass out for a few minutes, but you're doing great.
Yeah,
really, really good. There's even a little moment here with Inara and Mal, where Mal kind of like notices her lips bust from when Early hit her. And sort of like goes to touch and says, "Oh, how's your lip?" And she kind of pulls away, and it's this kind of like moment. Again, it was almost a moment of intimacy, and she pulled away yet again. So just continuing that thread, really good. It's a shame there's not another episode to continue more.
That is.
But it's there. We see Book is pissed that he was taken out, and he even lies a little bit. He lies to Jane.
He embellishes the truth.
He says that he put up a fight, but he didn't. He didn't see it coming.
It was an epic fight. Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, at least you got some action. I missed the whole damn thing."
Yeah. It's telling he wants Jane to think good of him here.
Yeah, I know. It's good. I love their friendship. And then we end with Kaylee and River playing their game again, which is nice because this almost goes back to the start of War Stories, because they were playing a game at the start of that. Not the same game, but they were playing games at the start of War Stories, and Kaylee's been kind of freaked out by her ever since that episode. So this was a nice end cap to that.
Even to the point where when they're talking about what she did at the end of that episode with the gun, they're like, well, maybe she thought it was just a game.
Yeah. And they play games. She's reminiscing of old stories, and River's like, "I can win," and she's like, "That's a lot of talk, big shot. Let's see what you got." And we get this because we don't know what. I mean, the game's like this weird. They're using like bouncy balls and these little triangle-y stick
it's
things.
Like the little metal crosses, isn't it?
Yeah. But the camera goes down below the floor. It goes back to the ship that we opened. The music comes back in, and we end in a beautiful shot of the ship. Before, of course, cutting to one final shot of Early just floating in space, just saying, "Well, here I am."
Yeah, because I think it was Inara that asked Mal, what are the chances of him still being alive? And he goes, well, with the amount of area, one in a very large number.
Yeah. So he's alive technically, but I mean, unless there was going to be a reveal in a later episode that someone picked him up,
which could have happened.
But
it's set up at the point here that he was still alive at the last moment we saw him. So, yes, he could have been picked up.
He could have been. I feel like that wasn't the intention, though. If I was to guess, I would say the joke is just meant to be him waiting for death and just being equally nonchalant about it.
No, I agree. I'm just saying if they'd have changed their minds and wanted to bring him back,
sure, yeah.
I don't think you could have complained about it.
Yeah. He had like a beacon on him or something. Someone came and got him. Whatever.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just after Mal goes, and brings her back inside the ship. Early ship flies off.
Mm-hmm.
Who did they autopilot that to just go? Or
I assume River pushed a few buttons before she hopped off.
maybe, yeah, because it definitely flies off. I'm like, where did it go?
Yeah, I assume River just programmed it to.
She might well have done. Yeah,
bunch off.
That's a perfectly fine answer.
She's good with math, as we've learned.
She is.
She can kill people with mathematics.
And other things.
Oh dear. Yeah, so I think just to sort of reiterate my point from earlier, it very much draws a lot of comparisons between Early and River, and the point is that everyone in the ship realizes that while she is different and she is weird, she's not to be feared because she doesn't see things the way that someone like Early does. She sees things in a happier way. And she did technically stab Jane with a knife, and they do bring that up. Jane does mention, remember when she came out with butcher's knife. They're not forgotten about that.
But ultimately, they're all like, "Yeah, but that was Jane."
That was Jane. No one cares.
I mean, there's even a joke about that later in the episode. Because I think with Mal not caring about, as long as they don't kill anyone important, and obviously referring to Jane at the time.
Yeah, no, good stuff. It's a great episode. It's a great episode that gives you some culmination for River. Not the complete culmination, of course, but it gives you everyone's kind of accepted her.
It's culmination in the sense that she doesn't feel like just the oddball outsider MacGuffin, basically, right? She was the reason why Simon was there, and so on. She was, she'd had moments, but she didn't often feel like a character that much.
It makes her feel more like part of the crew, and yeah, you're right. Like, she's more of a character now, in that we really care about how she feels, as opposed to just she's a plot device.
Yeah,
and that's necessary to eventually happen. And it's the sort of thing where if the show kept going, I can totally see there being a time when it seems like all is lost, and Mal's gets into the ideas can River do this? Can this impossible thing that none of us can pull off to save the day? Can River do it? And Simon's not going to like it, but ultimately there's not much of a choice, and River's going to save it. Then I could totally see that playing out somewhere around episode 19 of the season.
Just like a random, not a season final episode, just a random episode.
Yeah, I could see it being a big prominent episode. Now, obviously, plans changed because the show got cancelled, and we got a movie instead. And that kind of had to shake how the story progressed a little bit.
It's one of those things where, as much as we both like that movie, which we'll get into just how much next time, it's always like, but what if this was more episodes, right? Because it's 2-ish hours long.
Well, I mean,
it's always, but what if it was more?
Don't get me wrong, 4.5 more seasons is always going to sound better to me than a 2-hour movie, but that 2-hour movie is such a special thing for me.
Oh no, it is. I mean, even compared to just because ultimately that movie is kind of the season 2 plan, right?
Yeah. A lot of that movie is the season 2 finale. Whedon said that on the commentary.
Right. So it's less of 4.5 seasons, but what if this had the appropriate season build and was it was another even if it was just another 13 episode season again. What if it was just that more? You it's like, okay, that it could have been so much more. It could have, as much as it meant, partially through external circumstances, right? Because it means more because it was this, this unfinished show that was getting its last chance to kind of tell this ending. So as much as it meant because of all that stuff, would the story have landed even better had it, had the full season build and the threads had played out more naturally and.
I hate to use the word better. I think the key word here is they would have landed in different ways, because there's actually a lot of the meta nature of why that movie exists kind of baked into the themes of the movie and the plot.
There is.
That actually kind of enhances it. It's almost kind of genius how it kind of reshaped what the core feeling or message of that movie was.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of beautiful. And yeah, it'd have been different. Would it have been better? I mean, it's hard to say that, so much more of it, especially when, let's be honest, a couple of weaker episodes in this season, sure, but not bad. This season is so strong. And
It is.
so many season ones on network TV especially are one of the weaker seasons of a show. And the fact that this hit the ground running the way it did, it was taken from us.
It makes you wonder what would, season 2 or 3 have really been like.
That it really felt like, I mean, this is weird to like say this about Buffy and Angel, but it almost feels like they were the training, and this was going to be the thing that really like was the perfect thing that Whedon sort of built up to.
His magnum opus.
His magnum opus, the thing that was just absolutely, and Buffy and Angel have so much going for them, they really do. But
don't you ever bloody shut up?
Oh dear. And the existentialism in the episode, which is very intentional, and again, like people who know more about existentialism than I do can talk way more about it, but it is a thing that shows up in a lot of Whedon stuff, this idea, because Whedon is this atheist and absurdist, and what is the meaning of life when you believe there is no meaning kind of thing. In fact, when I looked up this episode on Wikipedia just to sort of read the general kind of summary of the existential elements of it, it even brought up a line from Angel, which is if nothing we do matters, then all that matters is what we do, right? Which is kind of this belief that, well, if nothing really matters, then choosing what we do is what matters. Then that is the choice that matters. That is the meaning of life. And it's this finding meaning where there is no real supernatural being of meaning. There's no grand plan. And there's a lot of that in Whedon's work. You can kind of say that it's not so. I don't think it's the sort of thing where if you're not looking for it, you think it's in the way of anything. But it's there. If you want to go looking for it, there's definitely that through line.
Honestly, I think it might be the most overt in Dollhouse, in that literally.
Oh sure, yeah.
It's all about identity and choice and action.
And Dollhouse, is definitely the weakest of his shows, and partly because of how it. Like, instead of getting cancelled like Firefly, got one more season, but they kind of knew it was going to end, so they had to truncate the rest of it into the end of the season 2, which is a shame because it got really good. Like halfway through season 1, it got really good, and then season 2 hit some really great high notes, and then it had to kind of rush the ending, which was a shame.
It's still worth watching. It's still
absolutely
good,
is. Yeah,
but it's not as good as it could have been.
I'm sure there's a Dollhouse already cancelled somewhere in the future. It's only 2 seasons. I mean, it's an easy one to do at some point. Not that that's next, of course, because after we do Serenity, the new Patreon exclusive already cancelled is going to be 6 Feet Under, as voted for by our patrons themselves. That'll be starting in January sometime, so look for that. It was originally going to be earlier, but Firefly got delayed a little bit as we were, October getting in the way especially. So. Here we are. That is the last episode of the show, but of course we do have the finale, which is the real finale, and that is Serenity, the movie. Which I would say, given that this episode reviews, I think, over 50 minutes at this point.
Have we jabbered on that long?
Yeah. I would expect a meaty discussion for Serenity. I would expect a meaty time.
Yeah, it's going to be a while. We should probably block, because we don't actually have that scheduled yet because of some delays that we had. So we need to block out a reasonable chunk of time for that one.
But that is us. So thank you once again for joining us. You can let us know what you thought of Objects in Space in the comments. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. All of that does support us, as does, of course, rating the podcast on Apple Podcasts. You can also get us on Patreon, patreon.com/mailfuzztv. You can get us over there and support us for as little as $1 per month. Get bonuses, get some exclusive content. The exclusive 6 Feet Under already cancelled will be there for $1 and up. The $5 tier, you get stuff early, including these Firefly reviews. Admittedly, this is the last episode. There's only the movie left, so it's not that relevant to this anymore. But other stuff goes up early for the $5 tier. And voting rights, of course, at the $5 tier. So go and have a look and see if you're interested. Keeps all the content coming, and that's good. So thank you very much once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching sci-fi TV shows, guy. What did I usually say before I get to the last part? I actually don't remember. Did I just say keep watching TV? Is that all I say? So. Yeah, okay. Keep watching TV, guys. But curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.